Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We are here with Daniel Snow from the Snow Agency. And here's why you need to sit up and pay very close attention to what Daniel has to say. He is a performance and social media marketing agency. They disrupt the e-commerce landscape for D2C brands. And Daniel specifically himself, he is a proven expert, having launched and scaled numerous viral e-commerce brands himself over the course of 3.5 years, generating over $50 million in revenue. So if you are on your way up, if you want to be on your way up, if you want to build your e-commerce brand, and if you think that Daniel and his agency can help you or at least teach you a thing or two, then close all the doors, put the kids away, get a pen and paper and listen to Daniel. Daniel, it's great to have you.
Thank you much for having me. Happy to be on the podcast today.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different, things always happening in SEO and e-commerce and social media. But what is your focus these days? What's your passion? What do you feel like talking about?
I would say I am in general and passionate about growth. We are a performance marketing agency, so growth is kind of our MO for not only our agency, but for our clients as well. So in general, just growth, how we can problem solve and apply all our different skill sets to various problems and hopefully see the impact that has on many of our clients. So yeah.
And so, I mean, so what does that mean by growth? Because I don't know, when someone mentions growth, they think about hiring a bunch of employees, spending a bunch of money, running a bunch of ads, looking at a lot of metrics. And it seems like a thing that is painful, but also scary, but also probably worth it. And then maybe something that a lot of us need to be thinking about, instead of just surviving, instead of just the day-to-day, moving to the big picture. So when you say growth, what does that mean to you? And what kind of actions should people be taking, which they are not?
So yeah, in general, growth is what makes me feel fulfilled. That could be personally, professionally, really anything of that aspect, ideally both simultaneously. So specifically professionally, growth as it pertains to our agencies scale for people. So like you said, a metric that we determine is growth, obviously revenue, but revenue can only scale for an agency's services with more people. So that is an easy function of how to determine growth. For clients, it's also easy, revenue growth. That's revenue growth and profitability for our clients is the only way we grow as an agency and the only way they keep paying our bills. So yeah.
So, and to help us kind of understand, I mean, do you have any fun growth stories of that have recently happened that you feel like talking about to kind of get us excited, get us energized, get us in this growth mindset?
Sure. Would you rather hear it for the growth of our agency or some of the brands we work with, or even some of the brands I own? You could take your pick.
I mean, I'd say up to you, but I'm interested in growth of your agency because it's deep into what you personally are doing. So yeah, let's hear about the growth of your agency if you can.
Yeah. So the agency, we were fully, the official launch was September 1st of 2019. Now we have 90 employees. So you can imagine that scale and how many, and even to this day, I just got off the phone with my director of operations, how much the infrastructure has had to change, adopt constantly to grow, because growth of an agency with that many people is not linear. Every time you hire tranches of people, those tranches of people need additional support, additional management, et cetera. And then we're adding new services. You run into the same issues simultaneously. So it's been a whirlwind. And also just dealing with people management of 90 human beings gets to be quite interesting, to say the least. So plenty of stories on that. If you have any questions around, any capacity in there.
Well, and I have a couple of questions come to mind because I mean, you're so right that it's scary and there's also kind of a structure that's needed, right? And what comes to mind is back when I was in college learning computer stuff, they taught us that, say you have like a memory card, like a piece of RAM in your computer, there's different chips on it, right? It's not just like if you have a 1 gig memory card, it's not just 1 gig, it's like there's maybe 10 little chips. And so, and that way, if one fails, then there are the rest. And also, as far as like the way that things are wired in, it's just like there's multiple modules that make up a bigger thing. And so kind of the reason that comes to mind is because you say, well, you hire 90 employees. It's not just like one person running 90 employees. There's, like you said, there's these tranches or like these cells. And so when you go from 0 to 90, it almost sounds like a car, but you go from 0 to 90 in this number of months. Like, what were the first couple of months like? Was it like a jump to like 5 or 10, or was it like 1 a week? Like, how did this non-linear growth you're talking about kind of start?
So, so prior to the agency, we definitely had a huge head start because I was running my portfolio of brands, like you mentioned in the bio. So, I had already developed, some semblance of training processes, and had the ability to manage teams. And obviously, we had the roadmap, so to speak, for scaling brands. So because we had that, it was a bit easier. So now we had to figure out the sales part, how to get clients, how to establish our name and the reputation, how to get partnerships with companies, how to get inbound leads. So for me, what I did day one was that I knew I didn't want to sell people all day. I don't enjoy it. And it's very time consuming. There's just no way you get around it. Time consuming to get on the phones, to follow-ups, to messaging back and forth, getting the deal closed, contracts. It's a whole process. So the first thing I did was hire a really talented head of sales that ideally would be able to grow with the business and be able to manage himself. So that being said, it still was like 6-month ramp up period for him to really know the ins and outs of the industry and speak to our specifics, et cetera. So that was the very first, actually, one of the very first hires I made was sales, so I can focus at least on the partnerships, our branding of the agency, and then obviously our client growth. So that was the first thing I did. And another thing we do when we're hiring marketers is we typically hire marketers in classes, because it is the same amount of effort if you're training one person or 4 people. And very oftentimes, especially when you're training entry-level people, there's churn. There's churn because they might not know what they're getting themselves into. There's churn because of stress. There's churn because this is what they want to do. There's churn because of a million things. So we learned that very early on, and we hired in classes of people, so that not only is there churn on their end, but also if we find people aren't a good fit, it gives, it requires a lot of time and energy. So that was the very first learning lesson for the agency. And as we grow now, the classes of people get bigger and bigger. So then as we grow, then we learn, in order to be very strong at media buying, we needed creative strategists and creative editors to be able to move quicker, because creative controls advertising. So then we created our next department, which was creative strategists. Soon after, we realized email and SMS marketing were an absolute need. So we found a department leader and grew a team around him. And then we found someone to do the same thing with the studio. Just bought our studio, the whole building last week. So now we're doing the same thing there. And we're continuing this trend of finding great department leaders and building around them. So, yeah.
And that's interesting to kind of hear your thought process of, you started here, then one thing led to the next, and it's cool to think about that, right? Like, as far as you say, well, here's like the bare essentials, here's what we need, and here's what I'm not able to do or what I don't want to do. So I'll hire this person or this team, and then this leads to this. And also that whole idea of the hiring like a few people for the same task and teach them all at the same time and have them all come up together. That's a thing that you just pointed out, that like I've kind of done that, not on your scale, but like on a smaller scale without really realizing it. Because my team's about 8 right now, but the last couple of like times I've gone back and done some hiring, I've hired like 2 people at a time, 3 people at a time. And usually like 1 or 2 have just like not worked out. We've kind of like, thrown them in and see how they work. And it was when the ones that have worked, it's like they all are kind of trained the same way, and then they kind of became friends and things like that. So that's interesting to think about. And in a lot of people's minds, maybe they say, well, I'm just going to hire this one person for one thing. But if the budget makes sense, or if the workload makes sense, if it's possible, why not hire a few people for the same task? And then that way you have a backup, because you always hear about like, depending on this person, and then they might drop out and then you're screwed. So you have a backup, but then also to train the same way. And so that's really cool to think about. And so, and this is exciting, right? You're buying buildings, you're figuring out video studios, and just going on to bigger and better things. And so now that we kind of got a feel of that, a feel of your agency and its growth, I also want to kind of go back to the other little teaser you gave me of you've helped these brands, right? Because I definitely don't want to pass up that stuff. That's why we're here, right? People of all different shapes and sizes are watching, listening to our interview, and some are a perfect fit for you and your agency. Some are maybe up and comers. So as far as the brands that you help, I want to jump in a second to talk about maybe a success story, but I'm always curious about, when we're talking with an agency, what's the right size of client for you? That way we know who we're talking to. So what's the right size here?
Typically, we work with many brands that we launch them from scratch. Typically, the brands that we launch from scratch are venture backed, because they have enough money in the bank to be able to understand the first few months there might be losses taken, versus and that they have to invest into content, into advertising, et cetera. And it's not just, you push a button and it just grows. It's not the way it is, especially post iOS 14. So remove those, because we do work with a lot of brands that start from scratch. We just launched a brand, 2 months ago. They literally from zero, and they're already at 100K plus a month in revenue on their second month in business. So besides those, I would say that the typical size of a brand would be brands that are doing 30K plus a month in revenue. So we work with brands that are doing anywhere between 30K a month in revenue to $3 million a month in revenue, and then even some really large enterprise level clients beyond that.
Fantastic. 30K to 3 million per month. And then, as far as giving us a feel of one of these case studies, what comes to mind? What's a brand out there that they were maybe doing great, but could have been doing better, and found you in your agency, and you really jumped in and worked your magic and made it super great? What happened there?
Our biggest case study is a brand called Hollywood Hair Bar, and we started this in the very early stages of our business, maybe our third month in business. She was doing $30,000 a month in revenue, and she came to us and had already seen. It was cool because she had already seen a lot of the brands that we'd created in the past. So she was really excited and thankful actually that we reached out to her, because she was ready to really grow her business. So at the time, she was focused on organic revenue. She built up a nice base of revenue, like I said, about $30,000 a month in revenue, and within 6 months, she was already doing $2 million a month in revenue. Her first 12 months in business with us, she did $25 million in that 12-month time period. So we took her from 30K a month, let's say $200,000 a year in revenue, to 25 million plus a year in revenue. So that's a pretty phenomenal case study of bootstrap business. One owner. So she's a badass, and she moves extremely quickly, because you can't, in order to grow that business, it's not just advertising. You need to scale customer service, inventory, operations alongside of it. And she constantly was pushing to keep up with the demand. So that's a really great case study, and we've become very great friends in the process.
And what do you think was the difference there? Was it a matter of like locating the low-hanging fruit? Was it one easy thing, a combination of things? How did you get this huge boost to happen?
It's a combination of things. Number one, there was definitely product market fit. Number two, she had a strong organic social media. Because she had a strong organic social media, she had an influx of content that we can repurpose on ads. And most importantly, she understood that we were experts. So it sounds crazy, but she took our advice on everything. And I don't mean that to sound pompous, but a lot of clients get pushback. They want to do things the way they want to do things. That's why I let them know you hire us to allow us to do what we do best. So she was constantly open to feedback, constantly open to suggestions, and we became a great team.
And I mean, what you mentioned right there, I mean, that's so huge, isn't it? That the whole idea of like being, I don't know if coachable is the right word, but like willing to change and knowing that there's this agency and you guys are experts and you know what you're doing. And if someone comes to you and hires you, it's like, well, which would you rather have? Like, would you rather feel good or maybe have a little bit of pain at first and say, you need to be doing these things, we need to be working together with these things and actually implement. And so when you're talking about these huge numbers, I mean, what comes to mind is is this like a brick and mortar or a place with multiple locations? Because sometimes when you think about, there's only so many hours in a day, there's only so much retail space. Like how do you, get to these huge numbers when there's some of these limitations in place?
That's an online store. So you could not do that in retail. At any given point, let's say she has 500 people on their website, say 50 people checking out. You can't do that in retail. It's not possible to scale that in retail. I guess you could scale it through many stores all over the country, but you wouldn't be able to do it in such a small time frame. Well, I guess maybe you could if you had a ton of money and hiring tons of people simultaneously. I don't know, but it would be a lot harder.
If you're Amazon or something,
it would be a lot harder. It would be much harder and less profitable. So yeah.
And then, so, I mean, was there anything, and having said that, like, was there anything scary in getting these numbers punched up? Because like, even with online, I can imagine like, there's extra ad costs, there might be like extra like inventory or like, deals with shipping or like multiple, multiple fulfillment kind of, deals to be worked out. So like, was there any kind of hiccups, hangups, like stumbling blocks as far as getting this business where it needed to go?
Definitely, forecasting inventory was I would say forecasting inventory and fulfillment were two of the largest issues when we started to rapidly scale her business, because both things take time. I think when we first met her also, she was fulfilling orders herself. So once again, thankful that she listened to us right away and she was able to get into a 3PL who was able to handle all that for her. But then, ramping up inventory when you scale that fast is tough too, because then the manufacturers have to scale that too, which a lot of now is beyond your control. So those were two of the largest bottlenecks, along with just scaling customer service and processes around that alongside that.
Well, cool. And so you mentioned that you work with these venture-backed companies, and I don't know that much about that space, but I imagine that it might be easy to make mistakes or easy to make bigger mistakes or easy to burn through money. Is that the case? Or like what's kind of the dangers, or what's kind of like the drawbacks to having a venture-backed company versus anyone else out there?
I wouldn't say it's easier to burn through it. I would just say they're more aggressive in their growth goals, and for that reason, they're willing to test more and make more mistakes. Why? Because that's how you learn faster, you fail faster, and you succeed faster. So that really is the best way to go about things. Just in general, and because they have the money, they're willing to do that. So they can move quicker on things. They're willing to make mistakes along the way with the intent of learning faster along the way and succeeding faster and growing faster. So that's the advantage, is just having money in the bank to be able to withstand some losses and test.
And I imagine that because of the speed, there's the need to have a lot of brains on the problem, right? A lot of people just like keeping a watchful eye on what's happening and thinking things through, because if just what comes to mind is if things are moving so fast, it's easy to be kind of on the wrong direction or doing the wrong thing for too long and not, and if something is a mistake, not correcting it, or if there is an opportunity, not pursuing it. Is that on the right track, that there's just this need to like just really be always thinking about things and always have your eye on the ball?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just what we find is, it's never good. Nothing's ever good enough, which is fine on my end. It's constantly grow. We had a great month. Now we got to double it. Now we got to double it. Just that constantly. So keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, right? That's exciting, especially if you think that way. And so, I'm sure that you since you said like you're out there so much that this Hollywood hair bar company, they notice they noticed you even though you noticed them. So you get out a lot. And is there anything that you see these venture backed companies doing that everyone makes this mistake and it drives you crazy, and you wish that this company and this company wouldn't make that mistake? Does anything come to mind as far as that, just like a common mistake that everyone's making, they need to stop doing it yesterday?
I would say just the most common mistake is when when brands are just don't take our advice, or they wait so long to take our advice that they're failing, and then it's like, okay, we're out, we need to do something differently. What do we do? It's like the thing we told you 3 months ago that you still haven't done because you didn't want to pay a few $100 or whatever. So yeah, the single most important mistake though is investing into content, investing into ambassador programs, which leads to organic content and everything around that, because content is truly the single greatest bottleneck for advertising. You need content specifically for Facebook and Instagram ads. You need it for TikTok ads. You need it for Snapchat, for YouTube, and all this content is different for each platform. So brands really need to focus on this and constantly test, because you need content from your customer personas that are buying your products. You can't just say, oh, we got one product video from someone who represents this persona and that's it. It goes around testing various unique value propositions, different problems, different demographics. So it really is really a very time-intensive task of trying to get constant influxes of content so that you can test on advertising.
Awesome. Well, that's really good advice. And when you say that, you make me think about how sometimes I'll just kind of end up liking someone's page, or I'll end up just like seeing someone's content on social media, and over time I'll be warmed up until next thing I know, every time they post, I'm always looking at it. And then sometimes for fun, I'll go and look at some brands ads, like on Facebook you can go and see all the ads are running, and some of these huge companies, like you scroll and scroll and it's like ad, and it's like I scroll through like thousands of ads. And so it's like this reminder for me that even though I might just suddenly notice some brand or suddenly notice some storefront, like there's a lot that goes into it. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And so you're so right. And I think that's really great advice, to be focusing on content and be working on it so much, because there's, like you said, every platform is different, and there's always a need to be always, cranking out some new stuff. So yeah, so there is the snowagency.com, and on Facebook it's facebook.com/the Snow Agency. So what's the next step here? I mean, if someone listening to our conversation today and they say, maybe I'm one of these venture backed agencies and I want to start a conversation, or maybe I'm someone else and I want to go and follow you and check out what you have, where do we go from here? After people jump off this interview, what's the website and what's the action to be taken?
Also, we worked with many, many bootstrap brands, and all my brands were all bootstrapped as well. So we're very, very accustomed to working with people that are scrappy, and I love it. So keep that in mind as well for anyone listening. But if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's I am Dan Snow, constantly posting tweet threads on growth tactics and new things, insights in e-commerce and digital landscape. And on Instagram, it's Dapper, so just DAPPER. And if you want to shoot me an email, it's dan@thesnowagency.com.
Fantastic. Dan at thesnowagency.com. And then what was the I am Dan Snow on Twitter. All right. And then what was
Dapper
the
on Instagram?
Dapper on Instagram. All right. Cool. So we see you there in those places, and it's always good to, especially if you listen to a podcast interview and there's someone who you really like, their ideas, you really like how they think, whether you are a bootstrap brand or a venture capital brand, follow Dan on social media. That way you can get into his head or he can get into your head. And then when the time is right, when he has a really good idea, when there's that technique you need to be following, when he has a webinar or a offer or something like that, you can jump on it. And you do because you got to know, like, and trust Dan. So we'll see you over at thesnowagency.com and all those other links that we mentioned. Thanks you so much, Dan, for stopping by and taking the time. I learned a lot. I think that people listening learned a lot. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much.